This video is not going to be long. It's not going to be long at all. Pet peeve. I have a show. As such, I can get across sometimes my own pet peeves. I don't like it when politicians use African Americans as props, and props for their own ends. Meaning, I'm going to give you lip service, I'm going to lick your ear, I may even do performative tricks for you, but nothing in real terms. African Americans and our politics over the last 40 years have been broken by an association with the Democratic Party. It's an understood association if you look at it in terms of context of civil rights, granted. But at a certain point, just because something was doesn't necessarily mean it always should be, nor does it mean that as it floats over the context of time that it doesn't necessarily turn into something that is not to our benefit. The breaking away of this notion of class and the notion of race has been a problem, especially since those two things are intrinsically linked. You get a situation where you have people who are advocating for things in this kind of performative measure of, hey, here's a black person, as if that person's identity in and of itself is somehow going to affect their politics. It may, oftentimes it doesn't, especially in the aspect of issues of class. It's as if somebody says, hey, that black person is there, and because that black person is there, everything else is perfectly all right. And that person is going to ensure that your interest is seen to, despite the fact that they, especially from a class standpoint and from the standpoint of people who are putting cash in their pocket, their interests are dramatically different than yours. I'm saying that class is intrinsic to race, and that whatever you want to think of King, he was a socialist. And whatever you want to think of the Democratic Party, they are not. They are antagonistic to such. Beyond that point, in order to sell a lot of the stuff to blacks, again, they would use a performative thing. They would put a black face there, so they would give you a Kamala Harris. And Clyburn would go so far as to say African Americans saying that they were being taken advantage of by the party should now basically shut up about it because you have Kamala Harris. You had a black president. She's going to be vice president. Her black face is not going to stop her in the same way Obama's blackness didn't stop him from giving 95% of the income to the top 1%. Those people who are out there protesting right now, I understand that the inciting factor might have been the shooting of Blake, or the inciting factor might have been the murder of Floyd, or any other list of African Americans. Breonna Taylor, for example, bursting into her house. Shocked the shit that if you burst into a person's house, that they may shoot back at you, considering they think you're thugs bursting into their house. I'm making the point that whatever you want to think of the performative measures that they may take towards cops, the issue that you are really trying to bare bones get to is poverty. Poverty incentivizes crime. It incentivizes violence. You're talking about the low brain mass or changes in brain chemistry associated with kids who are growing up in that particular situation. I would imagine affecting imagination, affecting even what they believe of their world. And that world would be fundamentally different, full of all sorts of limitations that people who are not entrenched in poverty don't have to deal with. Look at the society or the countries or the states, and beyond the states. Look in the various areas of your country, the communities, which are more violent, which have more crime. Crime and violence to some degree almost become rational in context of deprivation. I'm saying that if you really want to get rid of the issue, if you really want to bring down the hostility that's in your country, deal with the issue of poverty. The idea that in Wisconsin you have like a 39% poverty rate in Kenosha for African Americans, that is obscene. That's obscene. And your federal government would not do anything about it other than send in more cops, or the local government send in more cops. Like, your issue is there. If you want to get rid of the cops or defund the cops, deal with issues of poverty. Dealing with issues of poverty will organically bring down the amount of crime, the amount of violence, and beyond that point, your need for cops will diminish just by definition. You can't do a defunding of the cops without dealing with the issue that the cops are there to deal with in the first place. Beyond that point, though, people who constructed that criminal justice system, brick by brick, people who are far more culpable for the deaths of Floyd, for the deaths or the shooting of Jacob, just because of the mean-spiritedness that they put and infected into the political space, especially from the standpoint of criminal justice. Joe Biden, whatever you want to think of Joe Biden, is more culpable than probably any person alive for the way our criminal justice system engages the rest of the population, including African Americans. And the idea that he can use African Americans as props, especially when those African Americans was killed by the criminal justice system that Joe Biden helped inspire, and he turns around and goes to those funerals and hugs those African Americans and then looks them in the face and lies over and over and over again. He knows his sins, and that in no way stops him from going there and sitting with them and acting as if I have been with you along this entire rough path. That burns me. It burns me as an African American. It burns me as a person in general. I find the civil rights movement to be somewhat sacred. This is one of those cases where it is an actual win. And I greatly dislike people who use it for their own political ends, especially when in many respects they worked against the interests. Whether it's the pushing back against the busing legislation, whether it's that crime bill that he understood was racist in the bones of that crime bill. They understood that there was a disparity between crack and cocaine in that crime bill. Do you think that stopped them at all from allowing those monstrous sentences that they were putting in? Who do you think was doing that? Why do you think those cops engage the community in the way they engage those communities? Why do you think those cops are militarized in the way that they are? Why do you think that the criminal statutes are set in the way that they're set, with the as many black people can be thrown into prison as possible? Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden. That was his motive. Go back and look at those videos. Him screaming about, we've given the president the power to execute people, and the president hasn't been using that power. Yelling at Ronald Reagan that Ronald Reagan hasn't been tough enough on crime. And yet, again, he would go to a black church. He would kiss one black grandma on the face after the next. And he would hug her. I've been with you this very long path. And there's still work to do. Joe Biden is using people as props and lying still about being part of the civil rights movement. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. Like I said, this annoys me greatly. And you're going to get blacks voting for Joe Biden to the tune of 90%, if not more. And those same blacks will congregate, wring their hands, and say, I don't understand why they take us for granted. And I could talk to my mom. She was like, but Democrats have to do something different now. I said, why? You're voting for Joe Biden, right? Yeah. So why do I have to do something different? Like, they misunderstand that your relevance is incentivized by your own actions. That needs to be internalized. You are irrelevant to them. You don't matter to them. I don't even say that to be harsh. I don't even say that to be all that cynical. I say that because it is an irrational act for them to find you to be irrelevant. Why do I say it's rational? Because if you're a Democrat, and you have all of these people who are pulling on you, you've moved to the right in your policies, economic policies, meaning cutting services, and you fight back against Republicans. Yeah, they may be rabid, but basically you agree with their understanding and tenet of the world about markets being great. So a policy like Medicare for all, you would fight against it tooth and nail, despite the fact that the majority of the public, 69%, agree with it. The expansion of Social Security, that is not necessarily on the top of your list for things. You will give tax cuts, however. That would be easy. You will engage ourselves in foreign wars. That is easy. But when you get to the nub of economic policies that actually deal with ameliorating the hard edges of capitalism, you don't touch it. You agree, basically, with the Republican Party. You will use identity, though. And you will use people identity, something that is grossly and closely personal to those people, as a way of trying to hook various people in. But again, nothing to deal with the real material concerns of those people and those groups. Let's go to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to sit in front of a group of people and tell these people something that is fundamentally, entirely, demonstratively not true. That's Joe Biden.
I've been proposing these for a long time. I mean, literally for years. And the one thing I think we have to acknowledge, my mom used to have an expression. My mom would say, "You want to know me? Come walk in my shoes a mile." Well, even though I've been involved with the African American community and the civil rights movement since I've been a junior in high school, with the segregated movie theaters and the like, I can't understand what it's like to walk out the door or send my son out the door or my daughter and worry about.
Joe Biden, for the billionth time, was not involved in the civil rights movement. That's not me being unfair. That's not being wrong. And this is one of those things that goes back to the whole irrelevance argument. If I'm a Democrat with all sorts of people pulling on me, meaning I am to the right on the political spectrum, and being to the right of the political spectrum, I am not going to necessarily agree with policies that is going to get rid of the hardest edges of our system. Meaning, I understand that you want all of these policies that helps a particular community. I mean, for God's sake, Medicare for all, that would greatly benefit the people who are on the bottom of that rung, especially in the context of where we are now with the COVID-19 crisis. $15 an hour minimum wage. That is something that has been pushed. And again, that would be something that would benefit the bottom rung of the income ladder, especially people who are definitely exploited. But again, that is not necessarily something that is on the top of the agenda. I mean, you can go down the policy list, right? Elimination of student debt and allowing public free colleges and universities. Again, that is not something that is on the agenda. But all of these things are beneficial to the African American community, especially being on some of people being greatly in debt and in poverty. And those, there's a disconnect here. And yet, African Americans will vote 90% to keep the monsters at bay. The monsters at bay being any other party. My point is, regardless of who is in the other party, Satan himself can be leading that has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. You don't hold your vote and make a decision on who you vote for, not entirely because you're terrified, not even entirely because you doing so may allow that other person to win, that Satan so to win. It's more so because you realize you have a sense of integrity in yourself, and at some point you say no. And in saying no, you make a choice in saying, you get my vote when you represent my interests. Period. Leave. Is it possible that they can look at you and say, kick rocks, we don't need you? Or for that matter, no, we don't like the fact that you are standing up for yourself and have a sense of pride in yourself. No, we don't like that. So we're going to tank it to a man who we're calling the apocalypse in order to show you and give you a lesson. Now, that would give a lesson to America, not just to you and your particular community. But I'm making the point to you that it is also possible that they have no choice in the matter in this kind of widespread recognition across America that, oh my God, the black community has just told the Democratic Party to fuck off. You don't get our support without our express interests. Well, they have a choice of win or lose, right? My point is, there's a difference in those things. There's a vast difference in those things. One is you taking a certain degree of political responsibility of not bitching all the time about being taken for granted and making the choice of saying, yes, this is what we want, as an organized thought process. You don't believe that people can get together and make a thought organized in a way? How do you get 95% of people voting for Democrats that are black? I mean, for fuck's sake. I don't like the wringing of the hands. I don't like this weak positioning, whether that's from lefties or from that standpoint, or whether that's from blacks. And the fact that Joe Biden, you had Bernie fucking Sanders in the race who walked with Martin Luther King, and Joe Biden will get out there and say, I desegregated the movie theaters with you. And Bernie Sanders' mom, he walked with King. Joe Biden, despite what he's telling those African Americans in that place, this is true.
I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved. In what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
That's true. Don't take my word for it. Take his. Joe Biden. He lies like that over and over and over and over again. And the media gives him an entire pass on that. And one last point. Him being at these various funerals, him talking to Jacob Blake and everything else. I want you to listen to a caller that called in. Listen to what she says about this. This is phenomenal.
Chicago. Jill, you're on. What's going on?
Hi, how are you guys?
We're doing all right.
Hey, how's it going? What's on your mind?
I was calling about something Jamarl has mentioned a couple times, and I just wanted to kind of explain. He was talking about the disparity in unemployment in Kenosha, and it's really interesting to look at these communities. I'm from Chicago, and so what you're looking at, it's really good to understand what that is. So there used to be, in Kenosha, a small farming town. There was dairy farms, cheese, where they made cheese and so forth. But there was also a couple small plants where they manufactured small parts for the auto industry that would be put on boats, dragged across, the Great Lakes, and then delivered to Detroit, okay? So what you're looking at is the gutting of the Midwest,
That's true. That's very interesting.
All these jobs left. So steel was made in Rockford, Illinois. It was put on trains to go up to Kenosha. There was a couple small plants that could turn on a dime for the auto industry, make small parts, fans. They also did small engines for Caterpillar for like lawnmowers and jet skis and stuff like that, because Wisconsin is also a very recreational state of camping, jet skiing, lawnmowers, all kind of stuff like that. So those were all like motorized plants that built stuff. Okay. So when we look at those statistics, I mean, this is what we have done to our own citizens.
I hope you understand what she's saying. Basically, when people are reflexively voting Democrat over the years, and there's no accountability in the process, and as they tell you blue no matter who, and you take that kind of pragmatic choice, you're basically saying, look, I'm willing to accept a certain degree of poverty and all that entails, all of the crime, all of the violence, all of the internal harm that takes place with individuals, either through doping and drugs in order to get from point A to point B, the stress that's associated with it, the lack of it, also the depression, that comes with that stuff. We accept that. And in accepting that, we believe that level of poverty associated with that, and the trade deals and the policies and everything that goes into creating that and propagating that, We will accept that from Democrats. We will not accept that from Republicans because that goes too far. And when something blows up and you get a protest or whatnot, people want to throw up hands and they want to point at Trump, whatnot, missing the point that the underlying reason that those people are really pissed off is because basically you have made their lives a living hell with trade policies and the gutting of our country. That's what she's saying. She's saying, look, I live in this region. And when you are talking about people who are angry and pissed off based on the underlying factors of either unemployment,